next week, the Western Cape High Court will start to hear arguments for the decriminalization of sex work in South Africa. SWET, the Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force, is one of the organizations that is bringing this case to court. The media officer for SWET, Megan Lessing, joins me on the line now. Megan, a very good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Hello everyone. Thank you for having me.
Before we sort of talk to the merits you'll be bringing to the court, perhaps let's deal with the decision of the National Prosecuting Authority. They issued a moratorium this week on the prosecution of sex workers, pending, I imagine, the outcome of this case. Does this mean that the NPA is taking this matter seriously?
I think they have to be honest. I don't know how many people know this, but the decriminalization of sex work is actually already a part of government policy. It is part of the National Strategic Plan to address gender-based violence, and it's also part of government policy in terms of addressing the HIV infection rate. So it's already there, and this is why the Department of Justice has started opposing this case, because they already have intentions to decriminalize sex work. It has always been a problem of prioritizing it, and what sex workers are saying is that you are simply not prioritizing your own policies. And because you are not prioritizing your own policies, and this is why this case is now going to court, because it's basically saying it is time and it is also urgent.
So when arguments then are led at the High Court next week and the government, the state, is not opposing you, what will be happening then?
So what has since happened is that the MEK, some of those that oppose the decriminalization of sex work, has abandoned that bid as MEK and want to now, and this is what they will argue on Monday, is that they want to replace the Department of Justice as respondents. So, to stand in opposition as a respondent in place of the Department of Justice, and that is one of the decisions that will be as part of the outcome of that case, whether they will be granted that opportunity to do that. So since there's no one opposing this case, and we'll see what the outcome of that might be.
All right. So will that most likely be the first matter argued then when the case starts on Monday, whether or not there can be a replacement of a respondent on the case? And if the courts decide not, then there will be processes put in place through Parliament to determine the decriminalization of this, of sex work?
Yeah, well, then it's over because it remains, the purview and the mandate of the Department of Justice to create a bill and a regulatory framework around the decriminalization of sex work. So yes.
Yeah. Let me ask this as a naive person, Megan. So do excuse the crudeness of it.
No, it's perfectly okay.
But what will be the benefit of decriminalizing sex work? Why is this important for South Africa?
Yeah, I'm not aware, in terms of what people know about in what legal framework sex work currently operates. So just as a general, currently both the buying and selling of sex is a crime, so it is illegal. And what happens under the criminalization of sex work is that because it is illegal, it is often done, in secret. And because it is done in secret, a lot happens that is not brought to light, in terms of the violence. That is why it is part of the gender-based violence plan, because there's research that the government has done in terms of what sex workers experience, the level of violence that they experience, both from community in terms of stigma, often physical violence, physical and sexual violence experienced under the police, and then also the vulnerability, in terms of health and some of the practices that has happened. A lot of people are very shocked when we tell them that the way that police assess, and I put this in air quotes, whether you are a sex worker or not, is that they would go through your bag and check how many condoms you have in your bag and confiscate those, which is contrary to, some of the things that as a government and as a nation that we are fighting, the HIV infection rate. So those are the things that happen under criminalization. And what sex workers are saying is decriminalize the industry, work out put together a decrim bill, put together a human rights-based regulatory framework, that this industry can operate under, take the laws, existing laws that already exist in this country in terms of labor and other things and tax, and see how this industry can be integrated into those laws. So this is what, the decriminalization is all about.
Cause for Justice, and we should note, by the way, there are other organizations. I think, according to the report, there are 17 others. I don't have the listing of them. But Cause for Justice will claim that prosecution is inherently exploitative, it is violent and abusive, and is associated with an array of destructive and harmful consequences for the individuals involved in it, their families, surrounding communities, and the rest of society. Will a decriminalization of sex work help to address these concerns, do you think? Will the profession stop being exploitative, particularly of women? Will we see an end to violence and end to abusive scenarios?
So this is how we contextualize it. Just in short, when SWET started, it didn't start as a sex workers' rights organization. We started as an organization very much solely focused on direct intervention in terms of help. What very clearly became apparent is that whatever happens in the industry is not because the industry is inherently violent, it's because it operates in that legal framework. And this is the position that we have, is that criminalization makes sex workers vulnerable to exploitation, vulnerable to violence. And this is the distinction between, yes, bad things happen, but change the system, change the policy, and then you will see a difference. I mean, we've had the opportunity to be able to, for the past 20 years, have a relationship with New Zealand, who has been a decriminalized sex work industry country for more than 20 years. And there's no evidence to say that decriminalization increases exploitation or violence. Often, and what has come out in evidence in countries and some of the states in Australia that has now decriminalized sex work is that sex workers are now free to go to the police to access justice, to access services without stigma-free services, And I think often what happens is because, like you said, people don't have conversations about sex work. It's not, part of normal conversation. But one of the things that is very, very important is that you may not agree with the choice to do sex work, but you also don't have the right to deny someone for a South African person, a person who lives in South Africa, to deny them the right to operate and benefit from the constitutional protections that every South African is supposed to have, which is, the right to choose a trade, the right to earn a living, the right to live free and safely, and all of those protections. So that is what it is.
There's an estimation of about 153,000 sex workers in South Africa, a lot of them operating on streets, public streets in South Africa. You made a reference to the fact that it is illegal to both buy and to sell sex, but I imagine those who sell sex are disproportionately more arrested, I suppose, than people who are buying sex. Or am I naive in that reflection?
You're absolutely correct. The clients of sex workers barely or rarely face any consequences. The punishment, the harassment is solely focused on sex workers. I think, and I'm not sure, please don't repeat this. I'm not even sure in the last 10 years that I've heard of a case. I think there was one case of a client. So often, it is. We've had opportunity and have done some research, and there's people who have spoken openly about, with their clients and that, but it's not common, and often the focus is solely on the sex worker rather than the client, although both is a crime.
All right, those arguments will be heard in the Western Cape High Court starting this Monday. Megan, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Megan Lessing is a media officer for SWET, which is Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force, making a case as to why sex work should be decriminalized in South Africa.